Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're taking a seriously fast-paced, globe-trotting journey to the most dangerous, stunning, and absolute legendary summits on Earth. We're going to explore the highest peak of 15 different countries, and we're ascending from deceptive tourist magnets all the way up into the freezing, oxygen-starved heights of the death zone. You know, this really isn't just a geography lesson, it's a look at the absolute limits of human endurance against sheer rock, hidden glacial crevasses, and suffocatingly thin air. So it begs the question, why do we risk our lives for the summit? I mean, every single year, thousands of climbers leave the comfort of their homes to face blinding snowstorms, deadly avalanches, and literally absolute exhaustion just to stand at the highest point of a nation. Okay, let's dive into this, because the answers we find on these slopes are as varied as the mountains themselves. Before we even start our climb, I want you to just lock this number into your head, 29,032 feet, or 8,848 meters. That is the staggering, genuinely terrifying elevation of Mount Everest, the absolute ceiling of our world, sea level. Section 1. Icons of rock and fire, the accessible yet unforgiving giants. We're kicking things off with Table Mountain in South Africa and Mount Kosciuszko in Australia. Now, both of these are visually incredible tourist magnets. Kosciuszko is actually so accessible that you can take a chairlift part of the way up. But do not let their lower elevations deceive you. The real danger here, it's the violent microclimates. A beautiful, perfectly sunny morning hike can instantly transform into a blinding, freezing whiteout gale that has caught thousands of tourists completely off guard. Moving a bit higher, we encounter the Fireborn Mountains. Mount Fuji in Japan is this deeply sacred symbol, drawing hundreds of thousands of people to its perfect volcanic slopes just to watch the sunrise. But compare that to Mexico's Pico de Orizaba, an imposing dormant volcano. To summit Orizaba, climbers have to navigate a brutal labyrinth of jagged, unforgiving volcanic rock and cross a massive, high-altitude glacier where literally a single slip on the ice can be fatal. Section 2. Isolated freezing extremes, surviving the Earth's harshest climates. Sometimes the biggest killer isn't even the altitude, it's the absolute isolation. And this brilliantly illustrates the point. On one side, you have Vinson Massif in Antarctica. It's a peak completely surrounded by an endless expanse of freezing glaciers and brutal cold right at the bottom of the world. And on the other side, Puncak Jaya in Indonesia. It's this bizarre geographical anomaly. We're talking about one of the only equatorial glaciers on Earth, a jagged, snowy limestone peak jutting straight out of a steamy tropical jungle. What unites these two wild extremes is the sheer impossibility of rescue. Just reaching base camp is a complete logistical nightmare. For Vinson Massif, it means flying into an icy void where a single sudden storm can ground a specialized plane for weeks at a time. For Puncak Jaya, it means hacking your way through an uncharted, hostile rainforest just to touch the rock. You're dealing with rapid temperature drops and biting snowstorms in places where a rescue helicopter simply cannot ever reach you. Section 3. The Deadly Alpine Legends, Europe's Fatal Beauty. Surviving the Alps follows a pretty brutal timeline. First, you arrive at base camp, but almost immediately you enter the avalanche zone. Mont Blanc, which spans France and Italy, is notorious for these roaring, totally unpredictable avalanches that sweep entirely across popular climbing routes. Then comes the steep summit push, which requires intense technical rock and ice climbing. The Matterhorn's sheer knife-edge ridges offer practically zero room for error, demanding insane focus while you're exposed to high alpine winds. So we've survived deceptive weather, isolated jungles, and vertical rock walls. Let's move to Nagal and see how this builds as we leave the technical Alps behind and enter a realm where mountains are so massive, they literally begin to break the human body. Section 4. Giants of the Thin Air, Pushing Human Limits. We are now soaring into serious altitude. Mount Kilimanjaro in Tanzania, rising out of the African plains to 19,341 feet. Mount Elbrus in Russia, a massive twin-peaked volcano dominating the Caucasus at 18,510 feet. Aconcagua in Argentina, the highest peak outside of Asia, towering at a massive 22,837 feet. Mount Logan in Canada at 19,551 feet. And Denali in the United States, an absolute frozen giant at 20,310 feet. And here's a crazy fact. Because Denali sits so far north near the Arctic Circle, its barometric pressure actually makes it feel thousands of feet higher and drastically colder than its actual elevation. Above 18,000 feet, you hit exactly what climbers dread, the thin air. Oxygen plummets by half, your lungs heave, your blood literally thickens. Hypoxia sets in, causing severe exhaustion, hallucinations, and deep confusion. Climbing Denali or Aconcagua means spending weeks hauling heavy sleds into brutal, freezing climbing camps where just leaning over to tie your boots leaves you gasping for breath. So the absolutely crucial point here is that altitude isn't the only enemy. On Mount Logan, climbers have to navigate seemingly endless glacial systems that are riddled with hidden crevasses, deep enough to swallow a skyscraper. On Mount Elbrus, biting winds create wind chills that can flash freeze exposed skin in minutes. It is a terrifying daily battle of sheer physical exhaustion. Section 5. The Ultimate Summits. Entering the Death Zone. This is it. The final frontier. K2, bridging Pakistan and China. And Mount Everest, straddling Nepal and China. We have to speak of these two legendary mountains with absolute reverence. They hold a terrifying reputation. This is where human life is simply not meant to exist. This is where the mountain always has the final say. Here is the timeline for the most dangerous undertaking on Earth. Step 1 is trekking the massive, constantly cracking glaciers. Step 2 is the treacherous icefall. Everest's infamous Khumbu icefall is a terrifying, constantly shifting maze of towering ice blocks the size of apartment buildings, which can collapse into dust without a second's warning. And finally, Step 3. Ascending past 26,000 feet right into the teeth of screaming snowstorms to enter the actual death zone. Now, what's really interesting about this massive leap in elevation is the sheer vertical jump from a giant like Denali up to K2 and finally Everest. That gap, that is the jump into the true death zone. Above 26,000 feet, human cells actively begin to die. You cannot legally or biologically sustain human life up there. You are on a strict biological ticking clock. And the reality of that ticking clock is incredibly grim. K2 is known as the Savage Mountain for a reason. Its notorious bottleneck forces climbers to wait directly beneath a massive, fractured cliff of overhanging ice that could break off at any second. On Everest, commercial obsession has created literal frozen traffic jams. Climbers are trapped in queues for hours, completely exposed in the death zone, freezing as their bottled oxygen simply runs dry. Section 6. Humanity's Mountain Obsession. Why we climb. It is not the mountain we conquer, but ourselves. You know, this quote perfectly encapsulates the heart of the climber. People don't endure the frostbite of Vinson Massif, the jagged volcanic rock of Orizaba, or the suffocating death zone of Everest just for a pretty view. They go to strip away all the noise of the modern world. They go to face their deepest fears and to push the boundaries of human potential for just a few fleeting, glorious moments at the very top of the world. So as we wrap up this global ascent, I have to ask, which summit calls to your sense of adventure? From the sacred volcanic slopes of Fuji to the brutal frozen peaks of K2, where do your limits lie? And how far would you go to stand at the absolute peak of a nation? Think about that and keep exploring.